Introducing the AP Free Response Essay.
Okay guys, this video we're going to talk about the free response essay. We're going to talk a little bit about thesis statements and some about your introductory paragraph. Just remember that the free response essay is the last question on the AP exam. You are given a list of novels or plays which to choose from, but you do not have to choose a work that is on that list. You can choose another novel or play that is not on that list, whichever one that you feel like that you can use to help answer the prompt. So let's get started.
Okay, College Board will build their questions around common novel types. It's always going to ask you, like I said earlier, to choose either a novel or a play. But it is important that you guys understand the different types of novels that are out there. So if you see these terms in the prompt, you can understand what the prompt is asking you. The first one is called a Bildungsroman. It's a coming of age story. Think of Great Expectations or To Kill a Mockingbird. Dystopian is a quote-unquote perfect society where the human condition is greatly in error. So the more perfect the society seems, in actuality, the more dysfunctional it is. So think of like Fahrenheit 451 or even 1984. Your epistolary and your Gothic novels, a great example of both of those is going to be Frankenstein. Remember that epistolary is a novel that's told by letters or journaling, such as Walton in Frankenstein. And then, of course, the Gothic novel is going to be very dark, highly emotional, and dramatic. A historical novel is going to be where the characters and the events are actually immersed in actual historical happenings. So think of like Tale of Two Cities or even of Mice and Men. A novella is going to be longer than a short story, so Heart of Darkness is a great example of a novella. A novel of manners, these are novels that are written about social customs, behaviors of an era. For those of you that have read anything by Jane Austen, so Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility, these are great examples of that. A picaresque novel, it's a string of adventures. It's very episodic, so like The Count of Monte Cristo or Huck Finn. And then your social novels are going to be concerned with the societal conditions on humanity. Ellison wrote a book titled Invisible Man, which is a great example of this. And then there's a utopian novel, which unlike the dystopian, the society is actually free of issues. It's not dysfunctional. And Aldous Huxley wrote a novel titled The Island. Okay, whether you are writing your poetry essay, your prose essay, or your free response, you guys need to be familiar with the big 6 elements. These are going to be the elements that you are to look for and write about in your AP essays. So we're going to talk about diction, imagery, tone, syntax, point of view, and figurative language.
Okay, so let's start with diction. Typically, the AP prompt is not going to ask you to discuss diction on a free response essay because you just don't have the text in front of you, but you would see that as an option for the poetry or the prose essay. But let's go ahead and just keep focused on the free response. Imagery, obviously anything that has to do with the language that would engage the reader, invoke some sort of emotion. Remember how imagery, you could write about how it established the tone, created the setting, or even created empathy between the characters. You could also discuss tone in your essay, the attitude of the speaker toward another character, place, idea, or thing. Remember that the tone is the emotional quality of the passage. Imagery, syntax, and diction are elements that the author uses to express tone. Mood is the emotional quality of the setting, so that's a little bit different of tone aside from the attitude of the speaker. And then you always want to make sure that you have an idea of like tone shifts, changes in between like attitude or thinking of character and how that would affect the tone of the story. Syntax is another thing that you probably would not discuss on a free response essay just due to the fact that you do not have the text in front of you. You would use syntax to talk about poems or the prose. But however, point of view you could definitely talk about in your free response. The first person, why the author chose to write in first person, why the author chose to write in third person, whether it be the limited, the omniscient, the all-knowing point of view where you can see into the minds and the emotions of each character, or an objective point of view where it's just very factual and the author is telling the story with little or no emotion.
Okay, so figurative language is going to be something that you definitely can cover in your free response essays. You want to make sure that you know these 12 words very well and that you can pull examples from all the novels that we read in class. Allegory, apostrophe, hyperbole, irony, metaphor, metonymy, paradox, personification, simile, symbolism, synecdoche, and understatement. You want to make sure, again, that you are familiar with these words and that you can pull examples from the text. Okay, so now that you have a little bit more background on the free response essay and some things that you are going to cover, what are you supposed to do? Well, number one, you're not going to panic. Number two, you really have to understand your prompt. The prompt is going to ask you to carefully read a specific text, which obviously you would have already done prior to the exam. It's going to give you some sort of content task to accomplish. It's going to openly state a theme. It may or may not give you a list of literary elements to consider, but again, if you know those 12 that we just went over in the previous slide, you should be good to go. And it's going to directly tell you to write a well-developed essay.
Okay, so the content task is the focus of the prompt. It's what you are actually supposed to be writing about. So here are some examples. Choose an important character who is a villain, analyze the nature of the work, show how it enhances the meaning, or choose a scene that creates a powerful emotion and show how it enhances the meaning in the work. Analyze the sources of conflict between two characters. Analyze. And then analyze how a symbol functions in a work and what it reveals about the character. These things that I have highlighted, it's all about showing. Show the reader. You have to show, you just don't tell. You have to make sure that you are pulling examples of what the author did to show how the character is a villain or show how a scene is powerful. Analyze conflict. So using those literary terms, but then pulling examples, paraphrasing from the text, again, because you don't have the text in front of you, but pulling these examples from the plot to help illustrate each of these things.
So let's look at your thesis statements. For those of you that have a really hard time and you struggle with coming up with that main idea, that thesis statement, I'm going to go over just a couple of different formulas that might help you. You don't have to use these, but at least they'll help you just kind of get your ideas on paper. The first one is your basic three-part thesis statement. We've got the title of the work, the author, a strong verb, the concept or the theme, and then how this is illustrated by using one of the big 6 elements. Your point of view, syntax, diction, tone, imagery, figurative language. Okay? So for example, in Frankenstein, Mary Shelley illustrates the idea of abandonment through the use of figurative language and imagery. Okay? Now, this is a very simplistic form of a thesis statement, but again, like I said, at least it'll help you kind of get something on paper, and then if you start here, then it's easier for us to transform it into something a little bit more complex. Okay, here's another example. This one, we've got the author and the title in the middle of the sentence. Abandonment in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is illustrated through the use of syntax, diction, and imagery. Okay. One thing I will say is that you do not have to put the title of the book or the author's name in your thesis statement as long as you have introduced it somewhere in your intro paragraph. You want to make sure that your intro paragraph does have the title of the work that you have chosen and the author's name. Most students place it somewhere in your thesis, but if you don't want to, if it helps you to start your intro paragraph with the title of the work, that's up to you. You only need to state it once though. Don't state it somewhere in your intro and then again in your thesis statement because we don't want to be repetitive. Okay, here are some examples of some thesis statements. The remote settings in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein symbolizes the concepts of isolation and alienation, not only in the settings, but within the characters as well. So this thesis statement is telling the reader that you're going to talk about how the settings symbolize alienation and isolation. in the characters, not just the setting, but in the characters as well. Where the characters are placed, what this tells you about them, how this shows how they are isolated and or alienated, how the setting symbolizes all of these things. Through the use of the frame narrative, Shelley is able to illustrate various points of view to understand the connection between evil, reason, and passion. This statement is telling the reader that they are going to read an essay about the author's use of the frame tale, the story within a story, and how her decision to use this kind of story really illustrates evil, reason, and passion, illustrates how the point of view changes of these three things between the different characters. In Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the character development of Victor illustrates the theme of abandonment and consequences of such actions. I saved this one for last because it's a very simplistic thesis. We've started out with the author's name and then the title. This would tell me that I'm going to read an essay about how Shelley developed the character of Victor to illustrate the theme of abandonment. This last part, and consequences of such actions, I wouldn't necessarily put that in your paper. I think sometimes students feel like that they have to pack a lot into their thesis, but again, you want to keep it very short and to the point so that you could talk more about consequences in your paper, but really the meat of it, what you're really trying to communicate in this essay is, for example, in this one, it's just how her character development illustrates the theme of abandonment, okay? I will say this about your intro paragraphs, you need to have some sort of hook. Now, like I said earlier, if you don't have, or with the free response and you do not have the text in front of you, if there are a couple of quotes from each novel that you're studying that you can kind of commit to memory, starting your essay with a quote from that text is a great way to use a hook. And then going into, the introduction of the novel, the author, you could give a little bit of historical background, time period. Lunch is over. And then go into your thesis statement. But your intro paragraph is one of the most important paragraphs of your essay because you really have to hook the reader. You guys have to think that the AP graders, they're grading thousands of these essays. So how are you going to write yours to really get them from the beginning, okay? And again, you want to keep it interesting, you want to keep it insightful, you want to keep it kind of like fast-paced where they're not tripping over words or trying to figure out the ideas that you're communicating. You are to the point, there's no fluff. Okay, so we've gone over what you can expect a little bit from the free response essay. Sorry, I can't talk apparently. And we've gone over some thesis statements. You have a sheet in front of you where you've kind of been taking notes throughout the video. The bottom of that sheet, I've listed the 4 prompts, and you guys are going to choose one of those as to which one you're going to write your essay on. You are going to use Frankenstein since we just finished reading that one and you've been working on your cards and stuff for your literary analysis folders. So, although you normally get to choose which novel you want to use, I'm going to dictate the fact that you're going to use Frankenstein on this one. You are going to write your thesis statement at the bottom. Please make sure that you write something because again, I can't help you if I don't have a starting point. So come up with your thesis, bring it to class on Wednesday along with the rest of the handout that is filled out. Make sure you have everything filled out on that sheet to turn into me and we will get started. All right guys, until next time, see you later.